Perturabo, the Lord of Iron, the Breaker, the Hammer of Olympia, is the primarch of the Iron Warriors Traitor Legion, one of the original 20 Space Marine legions. Weaned on war and intrigue in the strife-ridden courts of his home world of Olympia, Perturabo was a grim warrior and master of technological arcana who wielded logic and the mathematics of warfare as keenly as he did a blade and bolter. The Lord of Iron was taciturn to the point of insult, preferring to harbor his thoughts against the threat of treachery, even amongst his own kin. Few would call him friend, but none could fault his ability to wage a campaign and plot the most direct course to victory, regardless of the cost, and despite the strain put on him and his 4th Legion during the long years of the Great Crusade. His word was as unbreakable as iron. According to Perturabo himself, he is estimated to have been born around the year 792 M30. When the primarchs were scattered to the ends of the galaxy, Perturabo landed on a planet named Olympia. For at least a year, he was alone in the rural regions of Olympia and became a famed wanderer that would slay legendary beasts. However, he was first discovered climbing the mountains below the city-state of Locus with no memory of anything prior. The gods, having realized this was no normal child, brought him before the Damicus, the tyrant of Locus. Damicus was intrigued by the child and brought him into his house and treated him as family. Damicus noticed the boy's overwhelming intellect and skill with everything from architecture to the arts to political debate to combat, and he became a wonder with which Locus secured alliances with other city-states. The young Perturabo, though he knew he was not of this world and was made by design as opposed to nature, was disgusted by the religious Olympians and believed in the cold logic of science and reason. Supposedly, Perturabo never trusted the Olympians and refused to return any affection given by Damicus. Damicus spent plenty of time with his new son, but never got anything in return. Perturabo shunned his siblings Hyrcon and Andos and only enjoyed the company of his foster sister Caliphone. Many saw Perturabo as a cold and brooding child, but when considered that he had been thrown onto a world with no idea of his origins or purpose, this is perhaps a little harsh. Perturabo waged wars against rivals for his adopted father, and due to the many warring city-states of Olympia, gathered enormous experience in siege warfare, overseeing the construction of many siege engines once thought technologically impossible on the planet. Perturabo soon scored victory after victory and became known as a merciless, bloody-handed warlord. Throughout his life, Perturabo was haunted by visions and feelings of a great maelstrom, though he told none of it as he feared it would be seen as a sign of weakness. When the emperor arrived, Perturabo immediately submitted himself to the emperor's mercy and ousted the tyrant of Locus. Damicus is said to have spent his remaining few years gathering forces to attempt to retake his power from Perturabo. He failed, but created a current of unrest which would be used later. Perturabo spent much time with his brother Magnus on Terra in his early days in the fledgling Imperium, attempting to discover the many secrets of mankind's past, and became particularly interested in the works of famous inventors. It became said that of all the Emperor's sons, Perturabo had the most raw scientific and technological knowledge. Upon taking command of his legion, Perturabo reviewed the war record of his new forces. After heavily analyzing their record, effectiveness, doctrines, and practices, Perturabo found them wanting. His punishment was decimation. By lottery, 1 in every 10 legionnaires was chosen to be beaten to death by his comrades. Such would be Perturabo's reign, brutal and unforgiving. Perturabo went on to lead his new Iron Warriors on a lightning crusade against the planet of Justice Rock and its heretical black judges. Perturabo established himself as efficient and highly capable, but also brutal, bitter and envious. It is widely acclaimed that Perturabo was envious of Rogaldorn, primarch of the Imperial Fists. He was annoyed by his constant reminders of the perfection of the defenses on Terra. The other primarchs also kept Perturabo at a distance. This might have been because of his supreme command of technology, far in advance of anything the other primarchs could do. He is referred to as the comrade who devised the best plan to avoid the defenses of Overdog Mashug, an orc war boss under attack by Leman Russ, leader of the Space Wolves, and Jagatai Khan, primarch of the White Scars. The Iron Warriors went on to create citadels throughout the regions they fought in. Small numbers of Iron Warriors were left behind at these outposts, but Perturabo resented being forced to split his army. As time went on, they were stereotyped as being the best army for sieges and garrisons, but eventually the Iron Warriors were so worn out that they simply began to enjoy the killing they had to do after the trenches were dug. A particularly vicious campaign was against the Hrud in the Sakadra Deeps, a region that Perturabo saw as strategically useless. Nonetheless, he dutifully oversaw the purging of the Hrud despite his legion's heavy casualties, as it was ordered by the War Council. At the climax of the campaign, as his fleet lay devastated by a Hrud temporal shockwave, Perturabo could only blame the Emperor's vanity for the damage done to his sons on this useless campaign. It might well have been Horus who kept the Legion on this role, allowing him to more easily sway the mind of Perturabo towards chaos. Shortly after the Sakadra Deeps campaign, Perturabo learned that his homeworld Olympia was in rebellion. Damicus was dead, and in his absence, the politicking and peckering of the city-states had resumed. Perturabo demanded the Olympians themselves enact decimation, killing 1 in every 10 of their own or face extermination and enslavement. Many refused, and Perturabo purged Olympia city by city, overrunning the fortresses he had built and sparing no one. Iron Warriors that refused to take part in the genocide suffered the same fate. By the time the massacre was over, 5 million Olympians had been killed, and the rest put into slavery. While storming Lucas's palace, Perturabo came across his old foster sister Calliophene and strangled her to death after a furious argument where she blamed the Primarch for what had befallen their world. As Olympia died, Perturabo looked on in cold silence. After the pyres were burning, the Iron Warriors realized what they had done. They were no more the saviors of the Imperium. They had been destroying the Hrud one moment, and the next they were committing genocide on their own. Perturabo realized the Emperor could never forgive him for what he had done. Horus, on the other hand, commended Perturabo for his decisive action, and the Lord of Iron swore an oath of loyalty to the War Master. Horus later made the most of the opportunity by presenting Perturabo with a hammer named Forge Breaker, which belonged to Pharaoh Manus, the gift symbolic of a signing of a pact between them. It was in that time that disturbing news of the Horus Heresy and new orders came from Terra. Leman Russ and the Space Wolves had attacked Magnus and his 1,000 sons on Prospero. Horus had turned renegade with his legion, the Sons of Horus, besides some other legions. The whole of the Imperium was on the brink of a civil war. The new orders were to join with 6 other legions and then to face Horus and his forces on Estevan V. The result of the following battle was that the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Ward Bearers, and the Alpha Legion all joined Horus and almost completely destroyed the 3 remaining loyal legions on the infamous Drop Site Massacre. After that, the Iron Warriors were let loose, and Perturabo relished the opportunity to fight in a way that did not rely on massive sieges and trench warfare. Because of their massive deployment throughout the galaxy, dozens of warsmiths took over planets and demanded tithes to support the heresy. After the first siege of Hydracordatus, Perturabo was approached by Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, who promised the Lord of Iron near unlimited power. The two embarked on a quest to tip the balance of the Imperium in Horus's favor by journeying into the Eye of Terra and retrieve a weapon known as the Angel Exterminatus. After a brief boarding action with the Sisyphean, which Perturabo allowed to escape due to his disgust of Fulgrim's legion, the duo arrived in the Eye and quickly landed on the crown world of Idris, entering an ancient Eldar citadel known as the Aemon Nashak Kalis. The Emperor's children and Iron Warriors had to contend with an army of Wraith Guard and Wraith Lords that had awoken from their slumber. At the height of the vicious battle, Fulgrim attempted to betray his brother and slip away, but was pursued by Perturabo. Both soon arrived in a massive spherical chamber, and Fulgrim revealed to his brother that there was no Angel Exterminatus, but he rather was destined to become such a weapon on this world. Furious, Perturabo attempted to attack Fulgrim, but was drained of his power when Fulgrim activated the Mujita stone that Perturabo had previously received under the guise of a gift. Now, with the Iron Warriors Primarch's power in hand, Fulgrim revealed the purpose of his plan to achieve apotheosis, better known as demonhood. However, just as Fulgrim was about to complete his ritual and achieve demonhood, Perturabo gathered enough strength to charge at his brother, but were interrupted by an ambush of salamanders, Iron Hands, and Raven Guard, who had been stalking the traitor fleet in search of vengeance since the drop site massacre. One of the loyalist Astartes during the battle shattered the Mujita stone, freeing some of Perturabo's energy and giving him the ability to strike down Fulgrim with his Thunder Hammer. However, Perturabo only managed to destroy the Primarch's mortal skin and was reborn as a demon prince, now a massive but elegant serpentine creature. Fulgrim told his brother that they would meet again, then vanished in a burst of warp energy along with his Emperor's children. Exhausted and betrayed by his brother, he knew he had now lost any trace of honor. Perturabo allowed the loyalist Astartes to withdraw and led his own forces off the crown world. Looking to settle the score with Fulgrim and better understand the cosmic power he had witnessed, Perturabo ordered his fleet sail deep into the Eye of Terra. Perturabo and the Iron Warriors next found themselves trapped by the singularity in the heart of the Eye of Terra. Perturabo gambles in his attempt to escape, diving straight into the black hole at its heart. Perhaps by sheer blind luck, they were transported far across the warp to the Tallarn system. Once arriving at Tallarn, Perturabo was made aware of the Black Oculus, a large black circular ring buried on the planet Tallarn that is one of 3 ancient gateways of the gods that predates the fall of the Eldar, and he immediately drew up plans to invade. Eventually, the Iron Warriors' search for the Black Oculus was exposed and they are forced to withdraw from the planet. Following Tallarn, the Iron Warriors were ordered by Horus to man a defensive line of walls in order to hold off the Ultramarines, which with the death of the Rune Storm were advancing towards the traitor's rear. Perturabo dutifully oversaw these vicious better sieges. Overstretched and under-equipped, the Iron Warriors once again bled for worlds far from the center of the war without thanks. Perturabo by this point had grown weary and darker, both from the effects of Fulgrim's treachery and the corrupting effects of the Black Oculus. Perturabo's war on Crusade was interrupted by Argonus of the Sons of Horus, who brought orders from Horus to find Angron and bring both of their legions for the Master at Ulanor in preparation for the drive on Terra. Despite having to abandon much of his forces as well as worlds he had fought so bitterly for, Perturabo obeyed the War Master and journeyed to Sarum with a small fleet in search for information of Angron's whereabouts. On Sarum, the demon Saram revealed that Angron was in Deluge before possessing the body of Volk, creating the first obliterator. Perturabo then traveled to Deluge, where he confronted the vicious and corrupted demon Primarch Angron. Perturabo and Angron engaged in a brutal battle, with the demon having the clear edge in power and speed. However, despite taking many wounds, Perturabo endured and goaded Angron, declaring that he was born a slave and now was a slave to darkness for all eternity. By using the Iron Warriors' Iron Circle and Volk to outmaneuver and bombard the World Eaters, Angron was bested as an Ultramarines fleet appeared in orbit over Deluge. Angron laughed and declared that they were all now going to die, but Perturabo reminded the demon primarch that he had seen his warriors butchered while he had done nothing once before. This moved Angron enough to act, and after creating a warp storm, the Iron Warriors and World Eaters fleets were able to escape the Ultramarines and move to Ulanor, where they accompanied Horus for the Master. Perturabo proved to be a pivotal and primary traitor commander during the Solar War. During the campaign to capture the Sol system, he oversaw the capture of both the Uranus and Jupiter defensive spheres from the Imperial fists. During the early stages of the Siege of Terra, Perturabo was not allowed to lead the siege of the Imperial Palace, but instead fortified the Sol system against Guilliman's expected arrival, something that embittered him greatly. Nonetheless, the Lord of Iron was able to review bombardment data and surmise a weakness in the palace's void shield network. Horus later met with Perturabo personally aboard the Vengeful Spirit, where while still compelled to obey Horus, he now saw the War Master as little more than a slave to the ruinous powers. Perturabo studied all the warp lore he saw aboard the damned flagship, pledging to master the Emperor and achieve powers similar to that of a god. Horus attempted to appeal to Perturabo's pride, emphasizing how much he appreciated the Lord of Iron's contributions and how he was the only primarch he could still trust. Perturabo was however still denied the coveted duty of besieging the palace, instead being ordered to clear landing zones for the traitor titans. After weeks of fighting, the traitor war effort stalled in the face of the walls of the palace, and the demon primarchs proved aloof and unreliable. Horus thus relied on Perturabo to conduct the main offensive push into the Lion's Gate spaceport. Hoping to overcome Dawn's traps with bluntness, Perturabo put Kruger in charge of the ground offensive while inserting Foryx and a unit of Iron Warriors behind enemy lines to seize key bridges into the spaceport. However, the attack stalled in the face of the Emperor's psychic shield of the palace, forcing Perturabo to rely on the Immaterium by having Zadu-Layak and Typhus summon Kopax Atablight to subvert the Imperial Palace's population. During the main assault on the Lion's Gate spaceport, Perturabo revealed that Foryx and his men had been sacrificed as a ruse in order to draw away Imperial Fist's defenses in order to allow Perturabo's flagship, the Iron Blood, to dock with the spaceport's main spire. As Perturabo sat down, Rogal Dawn met him on the field of battle. However, Perturabo refused to be goaded into a battle by Dawn's taunts, knowing the Imperial Fist's Primarch simply intended to buy time for his troops to withdraw. Perturabo instead promised that only after he had torn down the palace would he kill Dawn. Following the fall of Lion's Gate, Perturabo landed on Terra's surface and set up a command center to direct the siege. With Horus increasingly losing touch with the Materium, it fell to Perturabo to command the war effort, and he became the face of the enemy to the defenders of Terra. With the blessing of the War Master, Perturabo controlled his allies through a command staff that consisted of Abaddon and the Mournival, Erman, Typhus, Eidolon, and Krodovac. Perturabo directly connected himself to the traitor data network, absorbing enormous quantities of data and directing every facet of the siege with his own mind. In this state, commanding the greatest siege in history, Abaddon suspected that Perturabo was finally happy. In an uncharacteristically good mood, Perturabo praised Abaddon when he noticed the same flaw in the Saturnine gate that he recently had also discovered. However, Perturabo was worried that Dawn also knew of the flaw, and exploiting it would be a trap by his brother. As a result, he allowed Abaddon and the Emperor's children to attack Saturnine and suffer the losses and humiliation that would come with it should the assault fail. Sure enough, Dawn had known of the flaw and ambushed the traitors as they attacked. After the setback at Saturnine, Perturabo began to despair over the state of his allies. All save he and the Iron Warriors had by now fully fallen to chaos, and with his warriors marched all kinds of warp abominations. Perturabo realized that the war was no longer one of legion versus legion, and the ultimate test against his brother Dawn was now tainted. The final straw for Perturabo came after Horus informed Perturabo that he was to disperse his Iron Warriors amongst the various war zones and that his position was to be taken over by Mortarion and the Death Guard. Finally, having had enough, Perturabo ordered the Iron Warriors to evacuate Terra and withdrew to the Iron Blood. Later, aboard the Iron Blood of Mars, Perturabo watches the data coming in regard the final actions of the siege of Terra. He violently rages at being denied what should have been his greatest triumph, destroying whatever can be found around him with Forgebreaker. Now hating both sides equally, Perturabo contemplates killing Horus once he, in his mind by that point, inevitably prevails. Perturabo realizes he will need further power to survive in a sea of enemies and begins to wonder how to evolve himself into something far deadlier. After fleeing Terra following Horus's death, Perturabo took the opportunity to take vengeance on the Imperial Fists with a trap on Sebastis IV. The trap was known as the Eternal Fortress, a keep centered with 20 square miles of bunkers, towers, minefields, trenches, tank traps and redoubts. Upon hearing of this, Rogal Dorn publicly declared that he would dig Perturabo out of his hole and bring him back to Terra in an iron cage. Rogal Dorn expected an honorable battle, but this was not to be. Beginning by isolating the four companies of the Imperial Fists from their own orbital support, Perturabo began to carefully divide his enemy and destroy them piecemeal. Some Imperial Fists managed to penetrate the defenses and reach the center of the Eternal Fortress, only to find there was no central keep, simply an open space watched by yet more defenses. The fortress was a decoy of no real value, surrounded by 20 miles of killing ground. By the 6th day of the siege, Imperial Fist Space Marines were fighting individually, without support, using the bodies of their own battle brothers for cover. The siege of the Eternal Fortress, later referred to as the Iron Cage Incident, lasted for a further 3 weeks. Relief came in the form of Robot Guilliman and the Ultramarines, who drove off the Iron Warriors. But the siege left Rogal Dorn a broken man and rendered the Imperial Fists chapter unable to fight for 19 years. The gene seed of over 400 Imperial Fists was sacrificed to the Dark Gods, and Perturabo was elevated to the rank of Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided. Following this victory, the Iron Warriors fled to the Eye of Terra and secured a new demon world named Midringard, crafting a terrible fortress world where his soldiers ruled in vast towers. Perturabo's stronghold, Fortress of Hate, is said to be the most redoubtable of fortress walls. Today, the Iron Warriors give their greatest loyalty to Perturabo for saving them from sacrifice in the name of the Emperor. In the year 400 M32, Perturabo emerged once more to wreak havoc. Invoking Nurgle, Perturabo imbued an extremely contagious curse and released it into the mechanical systems on the Forge World of Toil. The Chaos Plague spread through the machines, and factory complexes changed over the course of 8 days. On the 8th day, giant cables burst from the ground, spewing forth hungry demon engines while the factories themselves grew legs and prowled the planet's surface. All life on Toil was eventually annihilated. In early M39, Perturabo aided Abaddon the Despoiler in the 10th Black Crusade by opening a war portal for the Black Legion. Perturabo spent much of the subsequent millennia studying the defenses of Sigmantum Obscurus and establishing a network of techno-cultist informants. After the 13th Black Crusade and formation of the Great Rift, Perturabo unleashed 1,000 armies and coordinated them in a grand strategy against the most heavily defended walls in Obscurus. After the formation of the Great Rift, he appeared to fight his brother Mortarion in the War of Frost and Ruin. Perturabo has collaborated with Vashtor the Archfane on many nightmarish technological projects. As such, he provided a complement of Iron Warriors to Vashtor to assault the Rock during the Arcs of Omen campaign. Perturabo's primary weapon during the Heresy was the Thunder Hammer Forge Breaker, a weapon that had previously belonged to Pharas Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, before being given to him as a gift by Fulgrim and Horus. For protection, Perturabo wore a highly modified suit of cataphractii pattern Terminator armor known as the Logos, one of the most advanced suits of its age. It was equipped with a wide variety of support systems as well as a teleport beacon. The Logos was also equipped with a pair of 4-barreled wrist-mounted cannons. On the battlefield, Perturabo would sometimes ride a modified shadow sword known as Tormentor. Alright guys, if you enjoyed this, hit that like button, leave a comment for the algorithm, and subscribe to stay tuned for more.